New York dressed itself in glass and gold that night, the city flickering like a chandelier across the river. On the 42nd floor of Pierce and Vail Holdings, the office light still burned after hours, thin, stubborn lines against the darkness. Most people were gone. Only the hum of the HVAC and the occasional elevator bell broke the quiet. Naomi Carter's screen glowed a pale blue on her face as she scanned the last notes of a quarterly compliance report. The numbers were clean. That was the problem, too clean. She minimized the document, exhaled, and rolled her shoulders. It was nearly 9:30 p.m. Still at it? Hazel from legal leaned on the doorframe, a takeout soup cupped in her hands. You know, there are laws about workers who never go home. Naomi smiled without looking up. I'm trying to earn the right to complain about those laws. Hazel stepped in, set the soup on the edge of the desk. Tonight's the big invite, right? The Harrington Hotel Gala. She had the careful tone of a friend measuring words. You sure you want to go? Naomi clicked open her calendar, where a gold block sat smugly at 8 p.m., Annual Midtown Philanthropy Ball, RSVP, accepted, required. Below it, a note from the CEO's assistant, from Mr. Pierce himself. Your presence is appreciated. Want isn't the word, Naomi said. He made it clear this is visibility. Visibility, Hazel repeated dryly. The kind you need hazard pay for. They both laughed, but the humor evaporated quickly. Naomi closed her laptop, fingers lingering on the lid, as if she could hold the quiet in place a little longer. She liked the quiet. She liked making sense of difficult things, emails stacked like dominoes, budgets bristling with decimals, travel plans that had to click together like clock teeth. She liked being reliable. What she did not like was the last 3 months with Jonathan Pierce. In the beginning, he'd been charming in that practiced way men are when they've had a lifetime of being told yes. His voice was gentle, a polished baritone. He smelled like cedar and clean sheets. His suits fit him like a secret. He called her Ms. Carter and then, too quickly, Naomi, a gradual slide she noticed because she noticed everything. Then came the extra work, just for this week, I promise. Then the jokes at staff meetings that nudged the line but never quite crossed it. Then the email she wasn't supposed to see, if we move the remainder through the endowments, the optics look cleaner. Attached, a spreadsheet that made her skin prickle. She wasn't naive. She knew how money moved in a city built on it. But the way Jonathan moved it wasn't just aggressive. It was surgical. Donations routed through shell nonprofits that boomeranged back into subsidiaries. Consulting fees paid to boards stacked with his golf partners. The Midtown Philanthropy Ball. An event honoring community reinvestment, sat like a crown on the head of a king who collected crowns for sport. Hazel squeezed Naomi's shoulder. You have an exit strategy. Right? Naomi's eyes shifted to the top drawer of her desk. She had compiled as much as she could without tripping any alarms, copies of ledgers, screenshots, emails she'd printed and then deleted traces of. A paper trail, because paper still told the truth when servers didn't. But she also had something else, 2 thumb drives, one encrypted, the other clean. One tucked under the foam of her glasses case, the other taped beneath the bottom panel of her desk. Yeah, Naomi said softly. I've got one. Hazel studied her. And you're not going to do anything reckless with it tonight, right? Naomi forced a smile. I'm going to put on the dress I can barely afford and smile for the cameras and laugh at jokes I don't find funny. That's the plan. Hazel nodded, unconvinced. Text me when you get home. I will. When Hazel left, the office seemed to exhale. Naomi stood and walked to the window. The East River wore a necklace of lights, and the bridges looked like delicate bones. Down there, somewhere, was her apartment in a walk-up that smelled like cumin and laundry detergent. Down there were the pieces of her life that fit, Sunday calls to her mother in Baltimore, the church on Lenox where the music made her cry without warning, the tiny friend circle she'd stitched together from college and work, and the random woman she'd helped on the subway platform who turned out to be the kind of friend who showed up with soup when you were sick. Up here, she was a secretary with a perfect calendar and a perfect tone of voice and a perfect habit of not making rich men uncomfortable. And yet, she was uncomfortable all the time. Her phone buzzed. From unknown number. "Where's something memorable tonight? It's a big night for you. JP. Her stomach tightened. She locked the phone and shoved it in her bag. The Harrington Hotel looked like the inside of a champagne flute. Gold. Bubbles. Music rising and bursting. Naomi stepped through the revolving door and felt warmth swallow her, a soft, perfumed heat that smelled like lilies, expensive hairspray, and big money. She wore a black satin gown that grazed the floor and a pair of heels she bought on clearance and pretended were comfortable. Her natural curls were pulled into a low puff. She had kept her makeup simple. In the mirror, she tried a red lip, then wiped it off. She wanted to look like herself. No costume. A woman at the welcome table scanned the list and lit up, too brightly. "Ms. Carter. You're with Pierce and Vale. Mr. Pierce asked for you the moment you arrived." She clipped a satin ribbon around Naomi's wrist, a VIP queue for waiters. The ballroom was a kaleidoscope of faces Naomi knew only from news feeds and whispered office stories, donors who treated parks like personal backyards, politicians who smiled with their teeth only. Entertainers whose laughs cut through noise like a blade. Crystal chandeliers cast warm constellations overhead. A jazz trio near the dais lazily reimagined Sinatra. Waiters slid through the crowd like lowercase letters, quiet, necessary. Naomi found Jonathan at the center, where men like him always were. He stood in a tailored midnight blue tux, his gray-streaked hair arranged with casual precision. He held court with a circle of admirers, laughing at a senator's anecdote. When he saw Naomi, he lifted his glass. The group turned as if commanded. "Naomi," he said, with a warmth that never reached his eyes. "You look extraordinary." "Thank you, Mr. Pierce." "Please," he said. "Jonathan." He gestured to the senator. "Senator Deal, this is the woman who keeps our universe from collapsing." The senator shook Naomi's hand with that light pressure powerful people use, as if their hands are precious. "A pleasure. Pierce talks about you often." "I'm honored," Naomi said evenly. Jonathan slipped his hand to the small of her back, shepherding her toward the dais where the MC, an actor whose smile could sell anything, was preparing his remarks. "We'll be making a little presentation tonight," Jonathan murmured, his breath warm and close. "I'll need you nearby." "Of course," Naomi said. She stepped away from his hand. "You got my text?" he asked. "I did." "Good," he said. "Because tonight is special." He left her at a table near the stage and drifted back into the crowd, a sleek shark among the minnows. Naomi sat carefully, inventing names for the people around her based on their shoes. Mr. Handmade Loafers. Mrs. Diamonds Don't Need Sons. She let her gaze settle, anchor by anchor, flowers, a mirrored column, a waiter's face that reminded her of her cousin, until her nerves quieted. A familiar voice cut through the din. "I thought that was you." Naomi looked up to find Miles Ortiz, a journalist she'd met at a community clinic fundraiser. He wasn't famous, but he should have been. His stories about housing and schools and the way people actually lived were the kind that made you feel at once furious and seen. He wore a suit that fit him like he'd borrowed it from a nicer friend and a press badge that looked like an afterthought. "Miles," Naomi said, relief blooming in her chest. "What are you doing in a room like this?" "Fishing," he said. "Seeing who forgets I'm here." He leaned in slightly. "You okay?" She hesitated. It had been months of quiet, of collecting, of waiting for the pressure to form a diamond or explode. She could not afford to explode. Not here. Not without a plan. I'm okay, she said. Just, being visible. He studied her. Call me if that visibility starts to feel like a spotlight on a trapdoor. I don't even have your number. He slid a card across the table. Now you do. He straightened. If the speeches are boring, I'll text you facts about whales. She smiled. I like whales. Me too. No one suspects a whale fact in a crisis. The MC tapped the mic. The room softened and turned. Naomi's pulse thrummed like an engine beginning to purr. Welcome, friends, the actor boomed, eyes shimmering with sincerity. Tonight, we celebrate generosity. He gestured to a slideshow, parks restored, children smiling with backpacks, food banks with full refrigerators. Naomi tracked the photos, marking the logos in the corners. She knew which foundations were real and which were origami boxes that collapsed when you breathed on them. The MC flourished toward the side of the stage. Our first honoree hardly needs introduction, a titan of industry, a man whose vision for this city goes far beyond the boardroom. Please join me in welcoming Jonathan Pierce. The room echoed, as if he were a sermon they all knew. Applause swept like a wave. Jonathan walked to the stage with the rhythm of a man who never tripped. He took the mic, rested his hand lightly on the plexiglass podium, and waited for the adoration to settle like confetti. Thank you, he said. It's good to be among friends. He looked good. He always did. He had a way of leaning into the room like he was telling a story just for you. He talked about the city as a living thing, hungry, brilliant, stubborn. He talked about the way up, about ladders and hands extended. He talked about his father, a dockworker who taught him the value of sweat, about his mother, a teacher who put books in his hands and hope in his mouth. He was so polished, Naomi thought, that he squeaked. And of course, he said, smiling toward Naomi's table, none of what we accomplish is possible without the people who keep us grounded. Tonight, I want to recognize someone special. Head swiveled. Naomi felt eyes prickle across her skin like rain. Ms. Naomi Carter. Applause again, polite, curious. Jonathan's face wore a benevolent pride. Naomi keeps our operation running with the efficiency of a NASA launch, he said. And she does it with grace. She's a reminder, his tone softened, of why we do this. To build ladders, yes, but also to celebrate those who climb them. Naomi felt the room's gaze collect on her like dust. She smiled carefully, the way you do when you're at the dentist and he tells you this won't hurt. She'll be assisting me tonight with a special announcement, Jonathan added. A new initiative that will bring literacy programs to underserved neighborhoods across the 5 boroughs. The screens flashed a logo Naomi hadn't seen before, Pierce Urban Readers. A photo of a smiling black child with a stack of books filled the background. Naomi's lungs went tight. She swallowed. The MC reclaimed the mic. How wonderful. Mr. Pierce, Ms. Carter, we'll come back to you in a moment. For now, enjoy your dinners. The room burst into motion, waiters descending with salads, silver domes clanging softly. Jonathan stepped off the stage and glided toward Naomi. You didn't tell me about the literacy program, she said, voice low. It's a surprise, he said, smooth as marble. Isn't it wonderful? What is it, exactly? A pilot, he said. We'll announce the first million tonight. Then we'll scale. From which endowment? He smiled as if she'd made a charming joke. Naomi. Enjoy the evening. He moved on, leaving the scent of cedar and applause. Naomi picked up her water and tried to keep her hands from shaking. She felt Miles's eyes from across the room. He raised his brows in question. She shook her head slightly. Not yet. The salad tasted like cold leaves. She forced down 5 bites and set the fork aside. A woman slid into the empty chair beside her without asking. She was late 40s, hair in a smooth bob, lipstick the color of committed decisions. "You're Naomi," she said. "I'm Veronica Vale." Naomi's chest flickered with surprise. Veronica Vale. The Vale, in Pierce and Vale, lived mostly at the board level, rarely descending to the floors where operations hummed and people like Naomi kept air in the machine. She'd made her first fortune in logistics, her second in selling logistics to other people. Her eyes were the exact gray of polished steel. "Ms. Vale," Naomi said. "It's nice to meet you." Veronica studied her, not unkindly. "Jonathan's right, you have presence." "I have a good blazer," Naomi said. Veronica smiled. "Tell me. Is this Urban Reader's thing as pure as it looks on the screen?" Naomi held her gaze. "I haven't seen the paperwork yet." Veronica's eyes drifted to the dais. "Jonathan has a taste for announcements. Paperwork often lags behind confetti. I've noticed." Veronica tapped a manicured nail against her water glass, thinking. "Watch him tonight," she said, voice low. "He's performing for someone." "The donors?" "Always. But more than that. Someone who can give him the one thing he can't buy." "What's that?" Naomi asked. "Permission." Veronica's eyes cut to Naomi's face again. "Be careful." She stood as fluidly as she'd arrived, melted into a nearby cluster of board members, and was gone. Naomi sat, pulse recalibrating. Permission. The word stayed like a seed under her tongue. Before dessert, Jonathan took the stage again, now flanked by a city council member and the philanthropist whose name adorned every arts building uptown. The screens cycled through smiling children and libraries, all of it built on a feeling Naomi knew intimately, the desire to be seen doing the right thing. "Tonight," Jonathan said, "we're launching an initiative that will change the trajectory of thousands of lives." He looked toward Naomi. "And I've asked the woman who inspired this to join me." "Naomi?" The room clapped as Naomi rose. It felt like standing into a wind. She walked to the stairs, careful, steady. The stage lights were warmer than she expected, a hot halo. Jonathan took her hand at the final step and guided her to the podium. "Naomi," he said, "tell everyone a bit about why reading matters to you." Her mouth went dry. She hadn't been prepped for this. Jonathan wanted spontaneity, the rawness that looks good in a headline. She thought of her mother, falling asleep with a book face down on her chest, of the church basement where she'd taught kids how to sound out because and tomorrow. She could talk about all of that. She could make them feel good. She lifted her gaze into the lights and saw only shapes. "Reading," she began, voice steady, "is how you learn you're bigger than the room you're standing in." A soft murmur. Heads leaned in. "It's how a kid in a one-bedroom in Baltimore can walk through Paris without leaving the couch. It's how a shy girl can climb out of herself and try on courage like a coat until it fits." She paused. "Books are ladders. And not all ladders get placed in the same neighborhoods." Jonathan smiled, pleased. She could end there, hand the moment back. He'd take it, package it, put it on LinkedIn with a thoughtful caption. But the room had gone so quiet she could hear the air conditioning. And in that hush, Naomi's spine found itself. She thought of Hazel's hand on her shoulder. Of Miles's card in her clutch. Of Veronica's word, permission. She thought of the spreadsheets that arced like bridges to nowhere, the invoices that circled back like boomerangs, the feeling of being told to stand in the light so someone else could cast a shadow. She looked directly at Jonathan. He was beautiful, like a statue cut by a man who loved symmetry more than truth. "Which," Naomi continued, her voice lower now, "is why I'm careful about who claims credit for the latter." The audience tittered, nervous, curious. Jonathan's smile didn't move, but his eyes did, a millimeter, enough for Naomi to know she'd stepped off the script. "Because if you take a child's photograph to sell a program that siphons money away from the schools they're supposed to attend," Naomi said, you're not building a ladder. You're polishing one you already own. A collective intake of breath. Phones lifted like a flock of small birds. Jonathan leaned in, a hand light on her elbow, the mic lowered between them. "Naomi," he said softly, almost affectionate, "let's stay focused on the positive." She stepped away from his touch. "I am," she said. "I'm focusing on what's true." Her clutch felt suddenly heavy. She didn't need to open it, not yet. She didn't need to plug anything in or project anything on the screen. The room was all screen now, 1,000 eyes recording, 1,000 hearts waiting to be told what to feel. The Pierce Urban Readers Initiative, Naomi said clearly, is funded through a shell structure called Evernorth Arts, which last year received a donation from a Pierce subsidiary tied to a construction contract in Queens. That donation left Evernorth and returned, minus a very generous consulting fee, to another subsidiary in time to show a loss in Q4. She turned to the council member. Which helped certain tax burdens disappear, right on schedule. The council member stiffened, smile turning into porcelain. "Naomi," Jonathan said, now with the tiniest crack of steel, "this is neither the time nor the place." "Oh," Naomi said, "I think it is." A laugh, sharp and involuntary, burst from somewhere in the crowd. Miles stood near a column, phone up, eyes locked on Naomi. Veronica Vale's expression flattened into poker. The MC blinked like a man who had rehearsed 1,000 outcomes and not this one. Jonathan's jaw shifted. "You're out of line." "I'm out of patience," Naomi said. "There's a difference." A murmur rippled through the ballroom like wind through a field. Naomi could feel the room begin to tilt, the air pressure changing. "Let me be very clear," Jonathan said into the mic, smile glued back in place. "These accusations are false. We will clarify any misunderstandings. And we will not." "Then clarify," Naomi said, and the word rang like a knife on crystal. She faced the audience. "Because what I have here," she lifted the clutch slightly, not theatrically, just enough, "are copies of emails, contracts, and transfers that detail a pattern of self-dealing and deception." Gasps. She didn't pull the documents out. She didn't need to yet. The promise of proof was its own gravity. Jonathan turned his body toward her, blocking her from the audience the way a man might try to shield a fire he'd accidentally started. "You should sit down." "No," Naomi said. He lowered his voice for her alone. "Think about your career." She lowered hers to match. "I am." For a heartbeat, they were the only two people in the room. Naomi could see it then, Jonathan's plan. He had intended to praise her, to drape her in a ribbon woven from condescension and credit he didn't intend to pay. He'd planned a joke at her expense, gentle enough to make her a good sport, sharp enough to remind her who owned the stage. He'd planned to look generous and left her smaller, grateful for the crumbs of spotlight. He hadn't planned for her to step into the light and refuse to be dimmed. For one breathless moment, the ballroom froze. It was as if the chandeliers themselves had paused mid-swing, the champagne bubbles had halted in their glasses, and every eye was locked on the woman standing at the podium. Naomi Carter's words hung in the air like smoke, impossible to wave away. Jonathan Pierce, master of the perfect moment, felt his grip on the night slipping. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She wasn't supposed to speak, not like this. His smile strained against the tension in his jaw. "Naomi," he said smoothly, though a faint edge sliced through his voice, "I think we both know this isn't the place." But Naomi didn't lower the mic. Her voice, steady and even, filled every corner of the gold-trimmed ballroom. "Oh, I think it is. In fact, this is exactly the place. Everyone here came to celebrate generosity, so let's make sure they know the truth about what they're celebrating." A murmur rippled through the crowd, the polite hum of charity gala conversation morphing into the electric crackle of something more dangerous. Waiters, caught mid-pour, leaned in just a fraction to listen. At the far end of the room, a photographer raised his camera slowly, as if not to break the spell. Jonathan's laugh was meant to sound amused, dismissive. Instead, it sounded thin. "You've clearly misunderstood though." "I haven't misunderstood anything," Naomi cut in. The clarity in her tone silenced him instantly. "For months, I've been quietly documenting every dollar that's been rerouted from the programs you claim to support. Not to the kids. Not to the neighborhoods. Back to your own subsidiaries, so you could pad losses, dodge taxes, and inflate your reputation as a philanthropist." Heads turned sharply toward Jonathan. A woman in a red gown whispered into her husband's ear, his brows drew together as he glanced at Jonathan with new eyes. Jonathan stepped closer to Naomi, lowering his voice to a hiss meant only for her. "If you keep going, you'll regret it." Naomi didn't flinch. She didn't even look at him. She addressed the audience. "What I regret," she said into the mic, "is staying silent as long as I did." From her seat at a side table, Veronica Vale's voice cut through the tension, not loud, but with the kind of authority that didn't need volume. "Show it." The AV techs hesitated, glancing at one another like schoolchildren caught between feuding parents. Veronica's gaze didn't waver. "Put it on the screens." Naomi's hand slipped into her clutch. She withdrew the clean thumb drive and handed it to a stagehand. The man hesitated, eyes darting between her and Jonathan. "It's all right," Naomi said calmly. "You'll want to see this." Moments later, the giant screens that had moments ago displayed smiling children now filled with Naomi's carefully organized spreadsheet. Date, amount, source, destination. Consulting fee. In bold red, her own neat notes connected each shell nonprofit back to Pierce-owned companies. No theatrics, no embellishment, just cold, hard proof. The gasps were immediate and sharp. Conversations broke into clusters. A man in a designer tux scrolled through his phone, likely searching for his own donation records. A councilwoman folded her arms, lips pressed in a tight line. This, Naomi's voice carried with surgical precision, is the paper trail. Each of these transactions shows how donations meant for education programs were routed away from the communities they were supposed to help. Over 3.4 million in the last fiscal year alone. And these so-called consulting fees? They're payments to companies Jonathan owns through silent partners. Jonathan's face remained fixed in a smile, but the flush creeping up his neck betrayed him. "These are incomplete records," he said sharply. "Taken out of context." Naomi tilted her head, her voice cutting through. "Funny, that's exactly what you said about the last audit. But this time, the context is all here." Veronica Vale rose from her seat and walked to the podium with measured steps. She didn't look at Naomi, she didn't need to. She looked at Jonathan. "For those who don't know me," she said to the room, "I'm Veronica Vale. My name is on this company, and my money has funded these initiatives. I have no interest in being tied to fraud. So, Jonathan, unless you can explain right now why your personal holding company received $1.2 million from Evernorth Arts 6 weeks before its bankruptcy, I'd say you owe this room more than a toast." The words hit like a slap. Jonathan opened his mouth, nothing came out. From the back of the room, a real estate developer's voice rang out, cold and clear. "I want my donation back." All eyes swung toward him. "You used my name to push that program in the Bronx. I wrote you a check for $200,000. Where did it go?" Jonathan's mask cracked. "We can discuss this privately." "No," interrupted the city councilwoman, stepping forward. "We're discussing it right here." The room was shifting. No longer Jonathan's adoring audience, they were now predators circling a wounded animal. Murmurs grew louder. "How much did he take?" "My company sponsored the library drive." I knew something didn't add up. The MC tried to step in, voice trembling. "Perhaps we could." "No," Naomi said firmly. "We've been silent long enough." Jonathan leaned toward Naomi, voice sharp but quiet. You don't understand the fallout. This will ruin you too. Naomi met his eyes, steady. I'd rather be ruined telling the truth than rewarded for living a lie. The crowd erupted in murmurs again, this time tinged with admiration. Miles Ortiz had worked his way to the front, camera rolling. Naomi, he called, can I get an on-the-record statement for the Post? Yes, she said without missing a beat. Jonathan Pierce has been using charitable foundations as personal laundering machines. Every document shown tonight will be turned over to the Attorney General's office tomorrow morning. Flashbulbs popped. Microphones appeared as if conjured. One reporter called out, do you have proof of personal gain? Another, are other board members involved? Naomi raised a hand. All of that will be in the report I've prepared. But tonight isn't about me, it's about the communities that were cheated. Jonathan tried to push through the crowd toward the exit, but two hotel security officers stepped into his path. One murmured into an earpiece, then nodded. Sir, we've been asked to escort you out. Jonathan turned toward Veronica, fury blazing in his eyes. You're siding with her? I'm siding with the company, Veronica said evenly. And right now, you are the liability. His voice cracked. You'll regret this. She didn't blink. No. You will. Jonathan tried to salvage dignity, straightening his jacket and forcing a thin smile as cameras followed his every step to the door. But the eyes that watched him weren't impressed anymore, they were cold, calculating, and full of judgment. Naomi stepped back to the podium, her voice softer now but just as clear. I didn't plan to speak tonight. But sometimes the truth won't wait for the perfect moment. To everyone here who's ever been told to smile and stay quiet, remember this, you don't have to. Applause began, slow and hesitant. Then it grew, louder, freer, until the entire ballroom was on its feet. Not for Jonathan. For her. As Naomi walked toward the doors, Miles caught up to her. You just blew up one of the most powerful men in the city. What's next? Naomi smiled faintly. Getting some sleep. He grinned. Call me when you're ready to talk. I think the world will want to hear the rest. She stepped out into the cool night air, the city's hum greeting her like an old friend. The weight of the clutch in her hand felt lighter now. She wasn't just visible anymore, she was unforgettable. If Naomi's courage lit a fire in you, remember, truth spoken at the right time can topple the mightiest walls. Share this story with someone who needs the courage to speak up. Because sometimes the biggest victory is refusing to be silent.